For this book review assignment, I chose to read and review the book You and Me Forever Marriage in Light of Eternity by Francis and Lisa Chan. When I was reading through the book list, I was deciding which book that I was going to choose, and I saw Francis Chan, and the Bible study that I go to recently just ended a series led by Francis Chan, and I really enjoyed the way that he articulated his Christian principles and his enthusiasm and passion for God. And so when I saw that this was a book choice, I was excited and wanted to read it. So basically, the summary of this book, the main thing of this book is that your marriage is not about focusing on your marriage, but it's about focusing on you. It's about how we need to pursue Christ first, and that is what matters the most, and then our relationships will fall into place from that. Um, Both of the chants, they talk about how eternity is forever, and so in compared to marriage and your life on earth, you're just a vapor that passes, and one day we'll be in front of the Lord and we'll have to explain why we did what we did and why we treated people the way we did. So he talks about how a Christian marriage, it can be a fulfilling marriage if Christ is involved, and it can be a reflection of Christ in the church, and our relationships can show how Christ can view, or how Christ views us and treats us, and it can invite others to follow him as well. It also, a main point of it is talking about the willingness to forsake happiness for holiness, in that marriage isn't necessarily designed just to make us happy, but it can make us holier, and we can spread the gospel and do more work through marriage and being with a partner. And then one of the quotes, it said, if two people make it their goal to imitate Christ in everything, then the rest will take care of itself. So I think as I was reading, I found that as the main theme, that if two people are striving and serving to follow God, then your relationship will fall into line with that. One example that I agreed with, and something that we kind of talked about in class, was how men and women are created differently, and they each have a different main need that can be met through marriage. So for men, it would be needing respect, and for women, it would be needing to be loved. And it talks about that in Ephesians 5. God commands husbands to love their wives and wives to submit to their husbands. Both of these, in the same way, the Chans talk about how they're equally impossible, how one is not necessarily easier than the other without Christ. And they talk about how when wives submit to their husbands, it's important to keep in mind that we're submitting to God. We're not submitting, and we're submitting to that leadership that he's put in place, which would be our husband, but they aren't perfect. And so humility is the main key that Lisa Chan talks about in a marriage. Something that also I saw aligning was the conflict styles, Gottman's conflict styles. The book talked a lot about conflict and arguing, and how arguments can escalate when we want to be more right than we want to be more like Christ, or we want to be right rather than being like Christ. In this book, makes strong points on how God gives grace and he will fight for the humble, so that when you are using humility in an argument, you don't necessarily win, but Christ is on your side, and you don't want to be against Christ even in your arguments. And James 4:6 talks about that. So this just reminded me of the conflict style, how you can deal with conflict in a healthy and humble way, and how Gottman's validating style, this is what I was reminded of. It's just when you are in conflict, that love is at the base of that conflict, and there's humility, and there's not any like cheap shots or just negativity in your conflict, but that you're able to work through it and grow. So one example of something that I disagreed with was, or I kind of just more had a question on this, was how the book talks all about how if two people are both striving for the Lord, then everything else will take care of itself. But they don't really go into address, like if your husband or your wife, if one or both of you are not striving to follow the Lord, like what that looks like in a relationship, what that could do for a relationship, how does that play out, and then how do you get your partner or both of you back on track for Christ. So that's something that I had a question about reading this, because it is such a faith-based book about marriage that if you weren't in the faith, I was just wondering some things, how that would play out in different things. And if I was to recommend this book, which I would recommend it to somebody who is recently married or somebody who hasn't been married yet, or basically anyone, because opening this book, I thought it would be more about marriage and steps to marriage, but it's more about, honestly, how you can come to God and how you can honor God in your life. How your life is so short that marriage can be a stepping stone to getting more work done for Him and just serving and striving and reaching more people that way. So I would recommend this book to somebody because it's deeply rooted in Christian principles. There's scripture almost every page, all throughout the book, and everything goes back to that scripture. And it also talks strongly about working on yourself and how you can honor God in your everyday life.